Welcome back. In this episode, we are going to install some brakes. Race cars go, and they also have to stop. So therefore, we are going to install some brand new strange brakes on the front of the Mustang. Check it out. Okay, next order of business. 35 spline axles. Got some standard issue C-clip eliminators here going on. Of course, the spool. Keep this stuff out of the way. U-bolts. We don't care about those. Okay, more cool stuff. Some will say, Brooks, that is just a normal pinion yoke. Yes, you are correct. However, I have incorporated the traction control from the MS3 Pro Ultimate into the Driveshaft yoke. But Brooks, that's just a plain yoke. You're right, it is. Here we have 3 different reluctor wheels that I draw up in that I've drawn up in CAD and sent over and had laser cut. So where they go is they fit nice and neat right there on the back of the yoke, like so. Now at some point in the very near future, we'll be adding a bracket on the rear end housing and a cherry type sensor that picks up that tooth right there. So I have 3 different tooth counts here that I can try out, you know, for resolution and all that good stuff. So now for the part I've been waiting for. Okay, so the next step is to cut the spindles like this. The one right here has already been done, as you can see. You have to cut both the ears off of it because of the way the calipers mount differently now. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the second one. Kind of boring stuff. You don't want to see it. Blah, blah, blah. And then once we get that done, we'll go ahead and get them installed on the car. The cool stuff. Okay, we got both spindles modified and both of them are painted and they're ready to go on the car. So we're going to go ahead and start assembling that stuff now. There's nothing really special about it. It's pretty straightforward. On the spindle, there's just a couple holes that you have to drill and tap, as well as cutting the ears off, and that's really about it. It goes back on the same way it came off. Okay, the new caliper bracket, there are rights and lefts on these for anybody that's following along, and that's noted as being sitting in the driver's seat. So this particular one, has an R on the part number and it says inboard side. So it goes on like that, and when you bolt the caliper up to it, these bushings are shouldered so it pulls against it. Otherwise it would be pulling the insert out of the plate and the caliper would fall off and you wouldn't be able to stop. That would probably suck when you're going 180 miles an hour. So, passenger side is the right side. Loctite everything on the brakes. Some would say that's overkill. Not me. Okay, pro tip number 4,352. Maybe 4,353, I don't remember. Anyways, don't forget to put the wheel studs in before you put the hub in place. If you don't put the wheel studs in, you're not going to get them in, and you will be taking the hub back off of the car. So, let's get those put in. I always Loctite those in place also. If you don't Loctite these in place, at some point in your racing career, you will find that these studs will unscrew at the most inopportune times, and you'll be struggling to find a way to get the lug nut off of the car or on the car. So when you put the Loctite on these studs, put it down by the shoulder. Reason being is you obviously don't want to run Loctite down the entire thread of the shank, because that same Loctite will get on your lug nuts, and we will be talking about the first part of this process I just mentioned, where that wheel stud screws in and out when you're trying to get the lug nut on or off. So make sure they start by hand pretty easily. And now it's time for the messy part. Packing the wheel bearings. Not my favorite job in the whole world. So we just take copious amounts of this synthetic axle grease that doesn't seem to come off for the next month or so. Pack it in there as best you can if you don't have one of those fancy dancy tools. This process has seemed to work well for however many years I've been doing this, so I guess I can stick with it. Usually if you get a small amount and rake it across the gap on the back of the bearing cage, the grease slides down in between the rollers pretty well. Extra grease for good measure. Same thing, smear grease all over it. And one more bearing in its home. Okay, I'm about to show you the biggest, quickest, patented seal driver tool there is. So fast, if you blink, you're gonna miss it. There, it's that easy. Okay, now that the bearings are installed in the hubs are ready to go on the spindles and get them torqued down. So we go ahead and slide it on in there. The washer. And the nut. Make sure you put a little grease around where the seal rides and on the seal itself. The seals are a little bit fragile. That seal still has a pretty fair amount of drag on it, but we're going to let that go. Put the little retainer in there. Cotter pin. One slightly strange dust cap in place. Okay, one of the last steps is shimming the caliper back and forth where it sits centered over the rotor. Now, for whatever reason, they're always shifted outward, so you have to put shims under the pad of the caliper, the mounting pad of the caliper. Strange supplies a whole bunch of little thin shims, and it takes several of them to get it centered up. I don't like using a whole lot of them, so I just go and get a couple of grade 8 5/16 washers, and they fit over the 3/8 bolts real snug. And they're usually pretty accurate in thickness within a couple of thousand. So in this particular case, it looks like we need about a 30-second worth of shim. Okay. And as luck would have it, that shim turned out to be exactly perfect. Exactly perfect. Is that? Yeah. It turned out to be exact. It turned out to be perfect. It works. So rather than use a whole bunch of these thin stainless washers, they're probably, I don't know, 10, 12 thousandths a piece. You just use one 5/16 washer. And every other time I've put these brakes on a car, that's pretty much what we've done. Well, I think that's probably as good a place as any to end the video. It's easy to make the race car go. It's more important to make it stop. So we got the front brakes done. Next thing we got to do is probably install the offset rack bushings so the rack will drop a little bit and correct some of the bump steer that the car will potentially have. That, and then we will probably start with taking the rear end apart and getting it reassembled with the new bearings and the new axles and stuff that I showed you earlier in this video. So that is it. We will see you guys in the next video. Don't forget, subscribe, share, and work on your car.